In 2023, during a routine excavation near the ancient city of Ur in Iraq, archaeologists made a startling discovery. Hidden within the ruins of a temple dating back to 3000 BCE, they unearthed a series of clay tablets depicting serpents in positions of reverence, not malevolence. These findings sparked a fierce debate among biblical scholars worldwide, challenging centuries of traditional interpretation about the serpent in Genesis. Dr. Sarah Cohen, lead researcher at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, notes, "What we've uncovered suggests that ancient civilizations viewed serpents not as deceivers, but as bearers of divine wisdom." The Hebrew word nahas carries layers of meaning that have been lost in translation over millennia. This discovery forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. Have we fundamentally misunderstood one of the Bible's most crucial narratives? The answer lies in a deeper examination of ancient texts and archaeological evidence that tells a far more complex story. The serpent in Genesis represents one of the most enigmatic and misunderstood figures in biblical literature. Traditional interpretations have predominantly cast this creature as a manifestation of evil, the tempter who brought about humanity's fall. However, recent archaeological findings and linguistic research suggest a far more nuanced reality. The heart of this mystery lies in the ancient Hebrew text itself. When we examine the original language, we find that the word nahas encompasses a rich tapestry of meanings that extend far beyond our modern conception of a snake. In ancient Near Eastern cultures, serpents were revered as symbols of wisdom, healing, and divine knowledge. Consider this. In ancient Egyptian temples, the cobra adorned the crowns of pharaohs as a symbol of divine protection. In Mesopotamian mythology, serpents were associated with healing and immortality. The Greeks placed serpent-entwined staffs in their healing temples. These weren't coincidences. They were part of a complex, symbolic language that the authors of Genesis would have understood intimately. To grasp the true significance of the serpent in Genesis, we must first unlearn our modern preconceptions and step back into the mindset of the ancient world. This investigation raises several crucial questions. Why did ancient cultures consistently elevate the serpent to such prominence in their sacred texts? What did the original authors of Genesis intend to convey through this complex symbol? And perhaps most importantly, how has our modern interpretation diverged from the original meaning? To answer these questions, we must examine three key areas. First, the linguistic roots of the Hebrew text, which reveal layers of meaning lost in translation. Second, the archaeological evidence from surrounding cultures that shaped the biblical narrative. Third, the evolution of religious interpretation through the ages. This isn't merely an academic exercise. Understanding the true nature of the serpent in Genesis challenges our fundamental assumptions about good and evil, knowledge and wisdom, divine authority and human autonomy. It's a journey that takes us from ancient temple inscriptions to modern theological debates, revealing how a single symbol can shape human thought for millennia. The Hebrew word nahas appears in Genesis with a complexity that English translations rarely capture. Biblical scholars at the University of Oxford and Hebrew University have identified at least three distinct but interconnected meanings within ancient Hebrew texts. First, as a noun, nahas refers not just to a physical serpent, but to a being capable of divination, one who can perceive or reveal hidden knowledge. Ancient Hebrew manuscripts show the word being used in contexts of wisdom and revelation, not merely to describe a reptilian creature. Second, as a verb, nahas means to divine or to discover hidden knowledge. The root appears in numerous biblical passages where prophets and seers practiced divination, suggesting a connection to sacred wisdom rather than deception. Third, the word carries connotations of shining or bright in related Semitic languages. Ancient Hebrew texts often associate this brightness with divine presence or supernatural wisdom. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain passages where nahas appears alongside descriptions of celestial beings and divine messengers. This linguistic trinity, serpent, diviner, and brightness, suggests that the Genesis authors chose this word with deliberate precision. The linguistic complexity of nahas extends beyond its primary definitions into a web of related meanings that shaped how ancient readers would have understood the Genesis narrative. In early biblical Hebrew, the word shares a root with nehoshet, meaning bronze or copper, metals associated with divine power and healing in ancient Near Eastern cultures. This connection becomes particularly significant when we consider the bronze serpent Moses created in the wilderness, described in Numbers 21, verse 9, as an instrument of healing. The term also relates to lahash, meaning to whisper or to enchant. Ancient Hebrew texts frequently use this word in contexts of secret knowledge or sacred mysteries. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain passages where these terms appear together, suggesting an understood connection between serpents and divine secrets. Particularly revealing is the word's relationship to Nahash El, which appears in ancient Hebrew inscriptions found in the Sinai Peninsula. This combination of serpent and divine suggests that early Hebrew speakers recognized an inherent connection between serpentine imagery and divine wisdom. The rabbinical texts of the Talmud further explore these connections. One notable discussion in Tractate Sanhedrin examines how the serpent in Genesis demonstrates qualities of both wisdom and persuasion, using the multiple meanings of Nahas to understand its role. The medieval Jewish scholar Rashi noted that these layered meanings suggest the serpent was chosen as a symbol precisely because it embodied this complexity of wisdom, transformation, and revelation. To fully grasp the significance of Nahas in Genesis, we must understand its broader context within ancient Hebrew literature and culture of the time. In biblical Hebrew, words often carried multiple layers of meaning through their use in different contexts. The word Nahas appears not only in Genesis, but throughout various biblical texts, each instance adding depth to its meaning. In the book of Numbers, the same word describes both a dangerous creature and an instrument of divine healing. In 1 Kings, it appears in passages about wisdom and prophecy. Ancient Hebrew inscriptions found at archaeological sites across Israel and Jordan reveal how the word was used in daily life. Temple texts from Jerusalem mention Nahas in contexts of both warning and wisdom. Commercial documents from the period show the word being used metaphorically to describe clever or insightful individuals. The Dead Sea Scrolls provide particularly valuable context. In these texts, Nahas appears alongside discussions of divine knowledge and celestial beings. One fragmentary text describes a Nahas of understanding that brings enlightenment rather than destruction. Hebrew poetry of the period frequently employed Nahas in parallel with words for wisdom, knowledge, and divine insight. The Psalms use serpentine imagery to describe both danger and protection, suggesting a deep understanding of the symbol's duality. Contemporary cultures surrounding ancient Israel used similar terminology. Phoenician inscriptions show comparable linguistic patterns, where serpent imagery connects to wisdom and divine knowledge. This regional context suggests that the authors of Genesis were working within a widely understood symbolic framework. In ancient Egypt, the serpent held a position of unparalleled sacred significance, deeply influencing neighboring cultures, including the writers of Genesis. The most prominent example was the uraeus, the cobra emblem adorning the crowns of pharaohs, representing divine authority and protection. The Temple of Wajet, discovered in the Delta region, provides crucial evidence of how Egyptians viewed serpents as guardians of sacred knowledge. Hieroglyphic texts from the temple walls describe the cobra goddess not as a figure of evil, but as a protector of truth and royal power. The temple's artifacts, dating from 3000 to 2700 BCE, show serpents depicted alongside symbols of wisdom and enlightenment. Archaeological findings from Karnak Temple reveal how deeply this symbolism penetrated Egyptian religious life. Here, serpent imagery appears in scenes of judgment, healing, and divine revelation. The famous Book of the Dead contains multiple references to serpents as guides through the afterlife, possessing knowledge of both divine and earthly realms. Perhaps most significantly, Egyptian medical texts found in the Ebers Papyrus document how serpent imagery was connected to healing practices. The staff of Asclepius, depicting an entwined serpent, originated from these Egyptian healing traditions, later influencing Greek and Hebrew medical practices. This Egyptian context provides essential background for understanding how the authors of Genesis would have approached serpent symbolism in their own writings. In Mesopotamian culture, the serpent occupied a complex position in religious and mythological thought, particularly evident in artifacts discovered in the ancient cities of Ur and Babylon. The Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest recorded story, presents a pivotal serpent figure that steals the plant of immortality, a narrative that shares striking parallels with Genesis. Archaeological excavations at the Temple of Ningish-Sita in Ur revealed intricate serpent imagery connected with wisdom and healing. Clay tablets found at the site describe serpents as guardians of sacred knowledge, trusted with divine secrets. The temple's wall carvings depict serpents intertwined with the tree of life, suggesting their role as mediators between divine and earthly realms. The god Enki, one of Mesopotamia's principal deities, was often portrayed with serpentine attributes. Sumerian texts discovered in his temple at Eridu describe him as the keeper of the Me, divine decrees governing civilization. His association with serpents emphasized their connection to wisdom rather than malevolence. Babylonian healing rituals, documented in cuneiform tablets from the library of Ashurbanipal, frequently invoked serpent imagery. These texts reveal how serpents were seen as creatures capable of transformation and renewal, shedding their skin to emerge renewed, a powerful symbol of regeneration and immortality. The Canaanite understanding of serpent symbolism provides crucial context for the Genesis narrative, as Hebrew culture emerged from this broader Canaanite background. Archaeological discoveries at Ugarit, particularly the Rosh Shamra texts, reveal how deeply serpent imagery was woven into Canaanite religious thought. Bronze Age temples excavated along the Levantine coast show consistent use of serpent imagery in religious contexts. At the Temple of Baal in Ugarit, archaeologists uncovered bronze serpent figures associated with healing rituals. These artifacts, dating from 1400 to 1200 BCE, demonstrate how serpents were revered as symbols of divine power and transformation. The Baal cycle, preserved in Ugaritic tablets, describes the serpent Lotan, parallel to biblical Leviathan, not simply as a monster, but as a powerful cosmic force. This multifaceted portrayal shows how Canaanite culture viewed serpents as complex symbols of both chaos and order, destruction and renewal. Particularly significant are the discoveries at Tel Hazar, where temple inscriptions describe serpents as guardians of sacred knowledge. These texts present serpents as mediators between divine and human realms, challenging the later simplistic interpretation of serpents as purely evil entities. While the Genesis narrative predates classical Greek civilization, the Hellenic understanding of serpent symbolism provides valuable insight into how ancient Mediterranean cultures viewed these creatures. Archaeological evidence from Minoan and Mycenaean sites reveals early Greek serpent traditions that parallel Near Eastern symbolism. At the sanctuary of Asclepius in Epidaurus, serpents played a central role in healing rituals. The caduceus, a staff entwined with serpents, became a universal symbol of medical knowledge and healing wisdom. This symbol's widespread adoption demonstrates how serpent imagery transcended cultural boundaries to represent divine knowledge and transformation. Delphi, considered the navel of the ancient world, featured the python as guardian of divine wisdom. The Pythia, Apollo's oracle, derived her prophetic powers from this serpentine connection. Excavations at Delphi have uncovered numerous artifacts depicting serpents in contexts of prophecy and divine knowledge. Greek mythology presents serpents as complex figures associated with wisdom and transformation. The story of Tiresias, who gained wisdom after encountering two serpents, reflects this tradition. Similarly, the goddess Athena, embodiment of wisdom, kept sacred serpents in her temple on the Acropolis, a practice documented in both texts and archaeological remains. Let's examine the exact wording of Genesis 3:1-7, where the serpent first appears. The Hebrew text provides crucial details often overlooked in translations. Now the serpent was more arum than any beast of the field. This opening statement uses a word that can mean both crafty and prudent, a deliberate ambiguity in the original text. Ancient Hebrew commentaries note that arum also connects to the word for naked, creating a wordplay that links the serpent's wisdom with human awareness. The serpent's first words are particularly revealing. Did God really say? This is not a simple deception, but a Socratic-style questioning that prompts Eve to think critically about her situation. The Hebrew construction suggests genuine inquiry rather than malicious manipulation. When the serpent speaks again, it makes three claims. You will not surely die. Your eyes will be opened. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. Examining the Hebrew text, we find these aren't lies. They're precisely what happens. The humans don't die immediately. Their eyes are opened to their naked state, and God himself later confirms they've gained divine knowledge. The man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. The description of the fruit itself is significant. The Hebrew phrase tov vara, good and evil, often refers to complete knowledge or wisdom in ancient Near Eastern texts, not merely moral understanding. A careful examination of the serpent's actions in Genesis reveals a more nuanced role than traditionally understood. Rather than a simple tempter, the serpent functions as a catalyst for human transformation and consciousness. First, consider the serpent's method of interaction. It doesn't command or deceive, but rather engages in philosophical dialogue. The text shows a pattern of questioning that prompts critical thinking and self-reflection. This matches ancient Near Eastern literary traditions, where divine wisdom is often transmitted through dialogue and questioning. Second, the serpent's knowledge proves accurate. Every statement it makes comes true within the narrative. Humans don't die from eating the fruit. Their eyes are indeed opened. They gain divine knowledge of good and evil. This accuracy suggests the serpent possessed genuine insight into divine matters. Third, the serpent's punishment is revealing. While cursed to crawl on its belly, it isn't destroyed or banished from creation. Instead, Genesis describes an ongoing relationship between serpent and humanity, one of tension but also connection, suggesting a continuing role in human development. The text presents the serpent as what ancient Near Eastern scholars would recognize as a boundary crosser, a figure that moves between divine and human realms. This role appears in numerous ancient texts where such figures often bring divine knowledge to humanity, though this transmission usually comes at a cost. Most significantly, the serpent's actions catalyze human progression from a state of innocent unawareness to conscious self-knowledge. This transformation, while painful, marks humanity's first step toward moral autonomy and self-awareness. The serpent's interaction with Eve and Adam reveals a carefully structured dialogue that follows ancient patterns of wisdom literature. The text presents this interaction in three distinct phases, each with significant implications. The first phase involves the serpent's approach to Eve. Notably, it addresses her directly, treating her as an intellectual equal capable of philosophical discourse. The Hebrew text presents their dialogue using terms typically reserved for wisdom teachings, suggesting a teacher-student dynamic rather than mere temptation. Eve's response demonstrates active engagement rather than passive acceptance. She corrects the serpent's initial question about God's command, showing her understanding of divine instruction. The text describes her examining the fruit carefully, considering its properties for wisdom, behavior consistent with ancient Near Eastern descriptions of knowledge-seeking. The second phase reveals Adam's notably different interaction. Unlike Eve's thoughtful dialogue, Adam receives the fruit without recorded conversation or questioning. The Hebrew text uses simple, direct language for his action, contrasting sharply with Eve's complex interaction. In the final phase, both humans experience the consequences together. The text uses the plural form, "their eyes were opened," suggesting simultaneous awakening to new knowledge. Their immediate recognition of nakedness represents not shame alone, but newfound self-awareness, a theme common in ancient wisdom traditions. The sequence of their responses, recognition, covering, hiding, follows patterns found in other ancient Near Eastern texts, describing human encounters with divine knowledge. The consequences of the serpent's interaction with humans unfold in layers within the Genesis narrative, each carrying profound implications for understanding the text's original meaning. The immediate consequences follow a pattern common in ancient Near Eastern literature: acquisition of knowledge, recognition of vulnerability, change in divine-human relationship, environmental transformation, altered human condition. The serpent's punishment is particularly significant. While cursed to crawl on its belly, it retains its role in the narrative. The prophecy of enmity between serpent and human offspring suggests an ongoing relationship rather than complete separation, a complex dynamic rather than simple good versus evil opposition. The text's description of expulsion from Eden uses language that implies both punishment and progression. The humans are sent forth to work the ground, terminology that in Hebrew also connects to spiritual development and growth. The placement of cherubim to guard the tree of life suggests not just prohibition, but protection of divine mysteries until humanity is ready. Most significantly, God's acknowledgement that humans have become like one of us, knowing good and evil, confirms the serpent's promise. This divine statement transforms our understanding of the entire episode from simple disobedience to a complex narrative about human development and the price of wisdom. These consequences establish a new order where humans must actively engage with moral choice and knowledge rather than exist in passive innocence, a theme that resonates throughout ancient wisdom literature. Early Jewish interpretations of the serpent reveal a more nuanced understanding than later traditions would suggest. The Talmudic and Midrashic sources present varied and sophisticated analyses of this figure. The Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 29a, discusses the serpent's wisdom, noting that its questions to Eve demonstrated deep understanding of divine matters. Rather than dismissing the serpent as purely evil, these rabbinical discussions explore its role as a catalyst for human development. Medieval Jewish scholars like Maimonides approach the serpent narrative philosophically. In his Guide for the Perplexed, Maimonides suggests the serpent represents the human imagination or material desires, not evil itself, but a necessary part of human nature that can lead to either wisdom or folly. The Zohar, the central text of Jewish mysticism, presents perhaps the most complex interpretation. It describes the serpent as a manifestation of divine forces necessary for human spiritual growth. This text suggests the serpent's role was to challenge humanity's spiritual complacency, forcing growth through confrontation. Archaeological findings at ancient synagogues reveal serpent imagery used in religious contexts, suggesting early Jewish communities maintained a more balanced view of this symbol. Mosaic floors dating from the Second Temple period show serpents alongside other sacred symbols. Early Christian understanding of the serpent underwent significant evolution during the first centuries of the Church, as documented in various patristic writings and archaeological evidence. The earliest Christian texts, particularly from the 1st and 2nd centuries, show diverse interpretations. Justin Martyr's Dialogue with Trypho discusses the serpent in relation to both the fall and salvation, noting the paradox of the bronze serpent Moses raised in the wilderness as a healing symbol. Clement of Alexandria, writing around 200 CE, presented a philosophical interpretation. In his Stromata, he suggests the serpent represented spiritual knowledge that could be either beneficial or dangerous, depending on human readiness to receive it. This nuanced view reflected his engagement with both biblical and Greek philosophical traditions. Archaeological evidence from early Christian catacombs and churches reveals complex attitudes towards serpent imagery. Some early Christian art depicts the serpent not as a monster but as a sophisticated figure, often shown in an upright position engaged in dialogue with Eve. Origen's detailed commentaries present the serpent as a multifaceted symbol. While acknowledging its role in humanity's fall, he also discussed its connection to wisdom and transformation, drawing parallels with Jesus' statement about being wise as serpents. However, by the 4th century, Augustine's interpretation began to dominate, firmly establishing the serpent as a representation of Satan, a view that would become standard in Western Christianity. A comparative analysis of serpent traditions across religious and cultural contexts reveals striking patterns and significant divergences in interpretation. Ancient Near Eastern traditions share remarkable similarities in their serpent symbolism. Egyptian texts portray serpents as guardians of sacred knowledge. Mesopotamian literature presents them as wisdom bearers. Canaanite traditions associate them with healing and transformation. Early Hebrew texts show complex, multifaceted interpretations. The contrast between Eastern and Western interpretations is particularly notable. Eastern Orthodox Christianity maintains some of the early Church's nuanced view, as evidenced in their iconography, where the serpent often appears in dignified poses during the Eden scene. Byzantine church mosaics frequently depict the serpent with human features, suggesting its role as a rational being. Islamic tradition, particularly in Quranic commentary tafsir, presents the serpent as a vehicle through which Iblis, Satan, spoke, rather than inherently evil itself. This interpretation preserves the complexity of the original narrative while accommodating later theological developments. Medieval Jewish commentaries maintained multiple interpretations simultaneously. The work of scholars like Rashi demonstrates how different traditions could coexist, viewing the serpent as both a literal creature and a symbol of deeper spiritual truths. The serpent's symbolism continues to resonate in modern contexts, though often in ways that reflect the complexity of its ancient origins. In contemporary medicine, the caduceus and rod of Asclepius remain powerful symbols of healing, directly descended from ancient serpent imagery. Major medical institutions worldwide continue to use these symbols, acknowledging their historical connection to knowledge and healing. Modern psychological interpretations, beginning with Jung's analytical psychology, view the serpent as a symbol of transformation and self-knowledge. This interpretation draws directly from ancient meanings while applying them to contemporary understanding of human consciousness. In literature and art, the Genesis serpent appears frequently as a complex symbol of wisdom and transformation. Notable works from Milton's Paradise Lost to modern interpretations show ongoing engagement with the serpent's multifaceted nature. Academic biblical scholarship has increasingly returned to examining the original context of the Genesis narrative. Archaeological discoveries continue to provide new insights into how ancient cultures understood serpent symbolism, often challenging simplified modern interpretations. Religious communities today show varying approaches to the serpent symbol. While some maintain traditional views of it as purely negative, others are revisiting ancient interpretations that acknowledge its complex role in human spiritual development. The serpent narrative's implications continue to influence modern life in both subtle and profound ways. In contemporary healthcare, the serpent symbol persists in medical institutions worldwide. Major organizations like the World Health Organization and countless medical associations incorporate the rod of Asclepius in their emblems, maintaining an unbroken connection to ancient healing traditions. In education and academia, the serpent story raises fundamental questions about knowledge acquisition and its consequences. Universities and research institutions often grapple with ethical questions that echo the Genesis narrative. When does knowledge become dangerous? Who should have access to certain types of information? The business world frequently encounters similar themes. Corporate logos and branding often incorporate serpent imagery to convey wisdom, protection, or transformation. Apple Inc.'s famous logo, while not directly referencing the biblical serpent, plays on similar themes of knowledge and transformation. In environmental conservation, the serpent's role as a boundary creature between earth and divine realms finds new relevance in discussions about humanity's relationship with nature. Environmental organizations sometimes reference this ancient symbolism in their messaging about human responsibility toward the natural world. The serpent narrative teaches several enduring lessons about knowledge and human development. The quest for knowledge comes with both benefits and responsibilities. Just as the Genesis account shows humans gaining awareness but also facing new challenges, modern advances in technology and science present similar dual implications. Simple interpretations of complex symbols often miss deeper truths. The historical evidence shows how the serpent's role was understood with greater nuance in ancient times than in many modern interpretations. Cultural symbols maintain power across millennia. The serpent's continuing presence in medical symbols and institutional logos demonstrates how ancient meanings persist in modern contexts. The relationship between knowledge and wisdom remains complex. As in the Genesis narrative, having information doesn't automatically confer wisdom, a lesson particularly relevant in our information-rich age. Understanding the serpent's complex role in Genesis opens new perspectives on how ancient wisdom can inform modern challenges. The historical evidence reveals a sophisticated understanding of knowledge, transformation, and human development, that remains relevant today. Ancient cultures recognize that progress often comes through challenging established boundaries, a principle that continues to drive human advancement. Archaeological discoveries and textual analysis keep providing new insights into how ancient societies viewed these fundamental questions of knowledge and wisdom. Each finding adds layers to our understanding of this enduring narrative. As we face modern ethical dilemmas in areas like artificial intelligence, genetic research, and environmental stewardship, the Serpent narrative offers valuable perspectives on handling transformative knowledge responsibly. The story reminds us that seeking knowledge isn't inherently good or evil. What matters is how we use that knowledge and whether we're prepared for its consequences. Thank you for joining me on this deep exploration of ancient wisdom. If you found this analysis thought-provoking, I invite you to share your own perspectives in the comments below. What's your take on the serpent's role? How do you see these ancient insights applying to modern life? If you appreciate this type of in-depth historical analysis, please consider subscribing to the channel for more explorations of ancient texts and their contemporary relevance. Your support helps us continue creating thoroughly researched content. Don't forget to hit the like button if you found value in this video and share it with friends and family who might be interested in these fascinating historical perspectives.